Our species was going extinct, and there wasn't a damn thing we could do about it. High Counselor Neron stood on the balcony of the Vulcan High Council chamber, his gaze sweeping over the crumbling ruins of the once magnificent capital city. The buildings that had stood tall for millennia now lay in rubble, their skeletal remains reaching towards the sickly green sky like the grasping fingers of a dying man. A decade ago, the plague had appeared without warning, striking down Vulcans young and old with ruthless efficiency. The finest scientific minds on the planet had worked tirelessly to find a cure, but their efforts proved futile. As the death toll mounted and society collapsed, Neron had watched helplessly as his people slipped closer to the abyss of extinction. In a final desperate gamble, Neron gave the order to activate the ancient intergalactic beacon, a relic from a bygone era when Vulcans had dreamed of exploring the stars. The beacon sent out a distress signal, pleading for aid from any advanced civilization that might be listening. It was a long shot, but it was the only hope they had left. Light years away, on a small blue planet called Earth, the signal was received. Joshua Bennett, a brilliant xenobiologist with a penchant for unraveling the mysteries of the universe, was tasked with leading humanity's first contact mission. As the sleek human starship approached Vulcan, Joshua and his crew were stunned by the desolation that greeted them. They landed amidst the rubble of the capital, donning protective exosuits to shield them from the planet's now hostile environment. Neron and his few remaining advisors, their bodies emaciated and their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed, greeted the humans with a mix of desperation and wary hope. As Joshua listened to the Vulcans' tragic tale and examined the data on the plague's devastating effects, a grim realization dawned on him. Without swift intervention, the Vulcans would be extinct within months. But as Joshua delved deeper into the mystery of the plague, he discovered a far more sinister truth. The plague was no natural phenomenon, but a bioweapon of terrifying sophistication, engineered by an unknown entity to eradicate the Vulcan species. The implications were clear and chilling. If the creators of this weapon turned their sights on Earth, it could mean the end of human civilization as well. The stakes had never been higher as Joshua and his team raced against time to unravel the secrets of the plague and find a cure, all while an unseen enemy lurked in the shadows of the galaxy, watching and waiting. The fate of not just the Vulcans, but of humanity itself, rested on the shoulders of Joshua and his crew. They had come to this dying world as saviors, but now they found themselves in a desperate fight for survival, with the future of two species hanging in the balance. As Joshua and his team set up their base of operations amidst the crumbling remnants of the Vulcan capital, the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them. They worked tirelessly, distributing precious supplies and erecting quarantine zones to stem the plague's relentless march. In the makeshift laboratory, Dr. Emily Chen hunched over her samples, her brow furrowed in concentration as she sought to unravel the secrets of the bioweapon that had brought an entire species to its knees. Half a galaxy away, Admiral Marcus Blackwell paced the command deck of Earth's Space Defense Force headquarters, his teeth clenched as he listened to Joshua's grim report. The implications were staggering. This was no natural disaster, but a calculated act of genocide. Without hesitation, Blackwell mobilized a fleet of warships, their hulls gleaming under the harsh lights of the space dock. Among the reinforcements stood Major Liam Hoffman, his eyes hard and his mind sharp, ready to hunt down those responsible for this atrocity. On Vulcan, Joshua and Neron delved into the planet's vast databanks, sifting through countless files in search of any clue that might lead them to the plague's creators. As they worked, a name began to surface with alarming frequency: the Cormians, a warlike race with a long history of animosity towards the Vulcans. Decades-old reports told of skirmishes and territorial disputes, of a deep-seated resentment that had festered in the hearts of the Cormian leadership. Major Hoffman, his fingers flying over his console, intercepted a burst of encrypted communications that confirmed their worst fears. The Cormians had deployed the bioweapon, reveling in the destruction of their ancient foes. But even as the truth came to light, a new horror emerged. Joshua, his face pale and his hands trembling, stumbled into Emily's lab, his body racked by the all-too-familiar symptoms of the plague. The bioweapon had mutated, leaping the species barrier to infect the very humans who had come to save the Vulcans. As panic and desperation gripped the human crew, Emily redoubled her efforts, her mind racing as she sought a cure that could save not just the Vulcans, but her own people as well. In the skies above, the Cormian fleet dropped out of warp, their weapons primed and their intentions deadly. Captain Zortag, his face twisted with hatred, gave the order to fire, determined to eradicate the last traces of the Vulcan race and the meddlesome humans who dared to stand in their way. On the surface, Joshua, his strength waning but his determination unshakable, rallied the remaining human and Vulcan defenders. They took up positions in the rubble, their weapons at the ready, prepared to make their final stand. In the lab, Emily's eyes widened as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a potential cure taking shape before her. But time was running out. The Cormian ships closed in, their shadows falling over the ruined city like the wings of death itself. The battle for the future of two worlds had begun, and the fate of the stars hung in the balance. The Cormian ships loomed ever closer, their hulls glinting ominously in the sickly green light of Vulcan's ravaged atmosphere. Admiral Blackwell's mind focused as he surveyed the tactical display. The odds were grim, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. "Ambassador Rask," he barked into the comm, "you're our last shot at averting this bloodbath. Make it count." On the bridge of his sleek diplomatic vessel, Ambassador Soren Rask took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. His fingers danced across the console, initiating a transmission to the Cormian flagship. "Captain Zortag," Rask's measured voice rang out, "I implore you to reconsider this course of action. There is still time for a peaceful resolution." Zortag's face appeared on the display, his features twisted in a sneer. "Your words fall on deaf ears, human. The Vulcans will be eradicated, and you along with them." On the planet's surface, Dr. Emily Chen hunched over her workstation, her eyes bloodshot from countless sleepless hours. Holographic data streams swirled around her, a dizzying array of genetic sequences and molecular structures. "That's it," she murmured, her fingers flying across the haptic interface. "The bioweapon's adaptability, it's left it vulnerable." She spun to face Joshua, who lay on a nearby cot, his skin pale and clammy. "I've got it," she announced, her voice thick with exhaustion and hope. "A targeted antiviral. It should work." As Emily administered the prototype cure to Joshua and the other infected humans, tension crackled through the air. Hours ticked by, each moment an eternity of anxious waiting. Then a miracle. Color returned to Joshua's cheeks. His breathing steadied. One by one, the human patients showed signs of recovery. Above, the situation had devolved into chaos. The Cormian fleet unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, battering the human ship's shields. Admiral Blackwell's voice rang out over the comms. "All ships, engage! Protect Vulcan at all costs!" On the ground, Joshua staggered to his feet, his body weak but his mind clear. "We need to evacuate the Vulcans," he rasped, locking eyes with High Counselor Niran. "The underground bunkers. It's our only chance." As they coordinated the frantic evacuation, Major Liam Hoffman led his team of Marines to the city's outskirts. They dug in among the rubble, preparing to meet the Cormian ground forces head-on. "Hold the line," Hoffman growled, his rifle at the ready. "Every second we buy could save countless lives." In orbit, Admiral Blackwell watched in anguish as his ships were slowly overwhelmed. A desperate plan formed in his mind. "Captain Sorensen," he called out, "I need volunteers for a suicide run. Target the Cormian command ship's weak points. It's our only shot." Arya Sorensen's voice crackled over the comm, resolute. "We're on it, Admiral. It's been an honor." As the small, agile fighters streaked towards the heart of the Cormian fleet, Emily Chen raced against time. Her fingers flew over the controls of Vulcan's weather control system, dispersing the newly synthesized cure into the atmosphere. A hush fell over the planet as the cure spread. Then slowly at first, but with gathering momentum, the infected Vulcans began to recover. The relentless march of the plague ground to a halt. In the midst of the orbital battle, Captain Zortag received an urgent transmission. His eyes widened in disbelief as he listened to the report from Cormian High Command. "Impossible," he whispered, his face pale. "Our own weapon turned against us?" As the Cormian fleet disengaged and retreated, leaving destruction in its wake, Joshua Bennett and High Counselor Neron emerged from the underground bunkers. They stood amidst the ruins of the Vulcan capital, surveying the devastation wrought by the plague and the battle. The air was thick with ash and the acrid smell of destruction, but for the first time in years, there was also a glimmer of hope. The plague had been stopped. The Cormians had been driven back, but the cost had been staggering. "What now?" Neron asked, his voice hoarse. Joshua gazed at the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to pierce the toxic clouds. "Now," he said, "we rebuild. Together." The dust had barely settled on the ruins of Vulcan's capital when High Counselor Neron approached Joshua Bennett, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and urgency. The two stood atop a crumbling tower, surveying the devastation that stretched to the horizon. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," Neron said, his voice low, "but I must ask for more." Joshua turned to face the Vulcan leader, sensing the weight of his words. "What is it?" Neron gestured to the sickly green sky. "Our terraforming technology was severely damaged in the attack. Without it, Vulcan will become uninhabitable within decades." The implications hit Joshua like a physical blow. They had fought so hard to save the Vulcans from extinction, only to face losing their entire world. "We need Earth's help," Neron continued, "to restore our planet's ecological systems." Joshua nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I'll contact Earth immediately. We'll find a way." Weeks of tense negotiations followed. Joshua presented the case to Earth's leadership, emphasizing the strategic importance of maintaining a strong alliance with the Vulcans. Finally, approval came through. In the newly established Joint Command Center, Joshua addressed the assembled team of human and Vulcan experts. "This is an unprecedented endeavor," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "We're about to attempt planetary resurrection on a scale never before imagined." Dr. Emily Chen, standing at his side, pulled up a holographic display of their first target, a massive gas giant in a nearby system. "Our initial challenge is resource acquisition," she explained. "We'll be harvesting raw materials from the planet's rings." The room buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the plan unfolded. A fleet of specialized mining ships was quickly assembled, their crews trained for the perilous mission ahead. Joshua watched from the bridge of the lead vessel as they approached the gas giant. The ship shuddered as they entered the intense gravitational field, rings of debris stretching out before them like a vast frozen hurricane. "Engage tractor beams," the captain ordered. "Begin extraction." For days, the fleet worked tirelessly, battling treacherous conditions to secure the precious resources. When they finally emerged, their holds were bursting with the raw materials needed to jumpstart Vulcan's restoration. Back on the planet's surface, an army of workers and automated drones swarmed over the landscape. Massive atmospheric processors rose from the rubble, their towering forms a testament to the combined ingenuity of human and Vulcan engineering. As Joshua oversaw the construction of a soil replenishment facility, an urgent message came through from Neron. "We've discovered something," the Vulcan leader said, his face grim. "You need to see this immediately." Deep beneath the ruins of an ancient Vulcan city, Joshua stood with Neron before a hidden vault. Inside, row upon row of canisters lined the walls, each bearing ominous biohazard symbols. "Cormian bioweapons," Neron explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Far more deadly than the plague we faced." Joshua's blood ran cold as the full implications sank in. The Cormians had planned to utterly annihilate the Vulcan race. Within hours, Joshua was addressing the newly formed United Galactic Alliance. His impassioned plea for action resonated with the assembled delegates. A decision was quickly reached. A vast armada of UGA ships dropped out of warp above Cormia, their weapons primed. The message was clear: surrender all illegal weapons of mass destruction or face the consequences. Faced with overwhelming force, the Cormians had no choice but to comply. As Joshua watched the last of the bioweapons being loaded for secure transport and disposal, he knew this was only the beginning. The UGA Council chamber erupted in heated debate as Joshua presented his proposal for a permanent unified military force. "We must be prepared," he argued, "to face any threat that may arise." After hours of intense discussion, the motion passed. The first units of the UG Guard began to take shape, drawing the best and brightest from across the Allied worlds. Back on Vulcan, the Resurrection Project entered full swing. Joshua stood with Emily on a newly constructed observation platform, watching as swarms of atmospheric scrubbers worked to cleanse the polluted sky. "It's working," Emily said, a note of awe in her voice. In the distance, a patch of sickly green had given way to a hint of blue. Joshua nodded, allowing himself a moment of cautious optimism. The road ahead was long, but for the first time since they had arrived on this dying world, he could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Joshua Bennett stood at the viewport of the UGA flagship, watching as the last of the Cormian bioweapons were loaded onto secure transport vessels. A sense of relief washed over him, but he knew their work was far from finished. "Admiral Blackwell," he said, turning to face the grizzled officer, "I believe it's time we discuss the next phase of our alliance with the Vulcans." Blackwell nodded, his eyes still fixed on the viewport. "I'm listening, Bennett." Joshua outlined his vision for a joint human-Vulcan colony, emphasizing the strategic and diplomatic benefits. As he spoke, he could see the Admiral's interest growing. "New prospect," Blackwell mused, testing the name. "It's ambitious, I'll give you that. But can we spare the resources?" "We can't afford not to," Joshua replied firmly. "This colony will be the cornerstone of our alliance." Weeks later, Joshua found himself aboard the colony ship Horizon, staring down at the verdant world that would become New Prospect. Dr. Emily Chen stood beside him, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the swirling blue-green orb below. Major Liam Hoffman joined them, his posture rigid despite the awe-inspiring view. "Let's just hope it's as welcoming as it looks," he said, ever the pragmatist. As the Horizon began its descent, Joshua felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The planet's atmosphere shimmered around them, parting to reveal vast forests and glittering oceans. The ship touched down in a clearing, and Joshua led the first team out onto the alien soil. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, sweet, pungent, and earthy all at once. "All right, people," he called out, addressing the assembled crew. "Let's get to work." Days blurred into weeks as New Prospect took shape. Prefab structures rose from the clearing, surrounded by a flurry of activity. Joshua worked tirelessly alongside humans and Vulcans, marveling at the seamless cooperation between the two races. One morning, as Joshua reviewed construction plans with Emily, a young Vulcan aide approached them, his face etched with concern. "Mr. Bennett," the aide said, his voice tight, "we've lost contact with the scout team exploring the northern continent." Joshua's stomach dropped. He locked eyes with Emily, seeing his own worry reflected there. "How long?" he asked. 12 hours, the aide replied. "We've attempted to reach them on all frequencies." Joshua's mind raced. "Assemble a search party," he ordered, "and contact the UGA Guard. We may need their expertise." As night fell, Joshua paced the command center, waiting for news. The search parties had found nothing, no traces, no signals, nothing. Captain James Rader arrived with the UGA Guard detachment just before dawn. His team of human Marines and Vulcan Sentinels moved with practiced efficiency as they disembarked from their sleek transport. "Bennett," Rader greeted him with a curt nod. "What's the situation?" Joshua briefed him quickly, leading the captain to the last known coordinates of the missing team. As they approached the abandoned camp, the tension in the air was palpable. Rader knelt, examining the ground. "Plasma burns," he muttered, running his fingers over a scorched patch of earth. "High-energy weapons." Joshua's blood ran cold. "Cormians?" Rader shook his head. "This is more advanced. We're dealing with something new here." As if on cue, a piercing shriek echoed through the forest. The UGA Guards snapped into formation, weapons raised. Joshua's heart pounded as he scanned the tree line. Whatever had taken the Vulcan team was out there, watching them, and he had a sinking feeling that New Prospect's troubles were only just beginning. And he had a sinking feeling that New Prospect's troubles were only just starting. A plasma bolt seared through the air, missing Joshua's head by inches. He dove for cover behind a fallen log as Captain Raider bellowed orders to his team. Defensive formation, return fire. The forest erupted into chaos. UGA guards unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, their beams slicing through the dense foliage. Joshua's heart pounded as he peered over the log, trying to catch a glimpse of their attackers. "Bennett," Raider's voice cut through the din, "we need to fall back to the colony, now!" They retreated in stages, laying down suppressing fire as they went. Joshua's mind raced, piecing together the implications of this attack. This was no random encounter. Someone or something was actively working against them. Back at the colony, Joshua convened an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Dr. Chen's face was grim as she delivered her report. "The missing Vulcan team, we found traces of their DNA near the attack site, but the cellular degradation is unlike anything I've ever seen." Major Hoffman leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Are we dealing with a new bioweapon?" Before Chen could answer, alarms blared throughout the compound. On the main view screen, a small craft of unfamiliar design streaked across the sky, trailing smoke. "It's going down in Sector 7, an aide reported. Hoffman was on his feet in an instant. "I'll take a squad to investigate." Hours later, Joshua stood in the makeshift laboratory, staring at the alien corpse Hoffman's team had recovered. Its reptilian features were twisted in a rictus of agony, skin mottled with lesions. "The cellular damage is consistent with an illegal bioweapon," Chen explained, her voice tight with worry. "Whoever these beings are, they're playing with fire." A priority transmission cut through the tense atmosphere. High Counselor Niran's face appeared on the screen, his usually stoic features etched with concern. "Bennett, we've dispatched Commander Tirana and her stealth squadron to assist you. But there's more at stake here than just new prospect. If word of this bioweapon spreads—" Joshua nodded grimly. "I understand. We'll get to the bottom of this." Days passed in a blur of fortifications and frantic research. Chen worked around the clock, analyzing the bioweapon's composition. Joshua coordinated with Tirana's forces as they scoured the system for signs of the mysterious aggressors. It was Tirana herself who made the breakthrough. Her team located and boarded a cloaked carrier vessel hiding in the asteroid belt. The firefight was brief but intense, ending with the capture of the alien crew. Joshua watched through a one-way mirror as Raider interrogated one of the prisoners. The reptilian being, identifying itself as a Varntok mercenary, spat out its confession. "We were hired to sabotage your pathetic alliance," it hissed. "Our employer cares not for the means, only the results." As Joshua pored over the intelligence gathered from the Varntok ship, a chilling pattern emerged. The bioweapons bore unmistakable hallmarks of Cormian design, a supposedly dismantled research program. "It can't be," he muttered, but the evidence was undeniable. Rogue elements within the Cormian Empire were still pursuing their dreams of conquest, now using mercenaries as their proxies. Joshua's fist clenched as he made his decision. This ends now, he thought, already formulating plans for a strike against the hidden Cormian facility. The operation was a knife's edge of precision and daring. Human Marines and Vulcan Sentinels infiltrated the fortified installation, fighting their way through waves of security to the heart of the complex. Joshua led from the front, his pulse pounding as they breached the final laboratory. Cormian scientists scrambled for cover, their faces masks of shock and fear. "Secure the data," Joshua shouted, gesturing towards the banks of computers. "We need proof of—" An ear-splitting alarm cut him off. A Cormian technician had managed to trigger the facility's self-destruct sequence. "Everyone out!" Joshua yelled, grabbing what data files he could as they fled the imploding structure. In the chaos of their escape, a high-ranking Cormian scientist made a desperate bid for freedom. He seized Major Hoffman, pressing a weapon to the soldier's head. "Let me go," the Cormian snarled, "or watch your friend die." Joshua raised his hand slowly, mind racing for a solution. But it was Hoffman who acted, twisting suddenly to disarm his captor with a swift, brutal movement. As they secured the Cormian prisoners and boarded their extraction vehicles, Joshua allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The immediate threat to New Prospect had been neutralized, But he knew this victory was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. The captured Cormian mastermind glared at Joshua from the transport's holding cell, his eyes burning with hatred and something else, fear. Whatever forces had driven these rogue elements to such desperate measures, Joshua was certain they hadn't seen the last of them. As New Prospect receded into the distance, Joshua's thoughts turned to the challenges that lay ahead. The human-Vulcan alliance had been tested, but it had emerged stronger. Now they would need to work together more closely than ever to unravel the full extent of this conspiracy and secure their shared future among the stars. Joshua Bennett stood before the UGA Council, his voice steady as he presented his proposal. The events on New Prospect have made one thing clear. We need a permanent security presence to protect our alliance. Admiral Blackwell nodded, his weathered face etched with concern. Agreed. What do you suggest? A joint military garrison on New Prospect, Joshua replied, activating a holographic display. Human Marines and Vulcan Sentinels working side by side with orbital defense support. The council chambers buzzed with murmurs of approval. High Counselor Niran leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Who would lead this force, Bennett? Joshua didn't hesitate. I'd like to nominate Major Liam Hoffman for promotion to colonel. He's proven himself time and again. Hours later, Joshua stood on the observation deck of the newly christened garrison, watching as dropships ferried personnel and equipment to the surface. Colonel Hoffman approached, his new rank insignia gleaming. Sir, Hoffman said, snapping a crisp salute. The ground forces are at 60% operational capacity. Commander Tirana reports her squadrons will be combat-ready within 48 hours. Joshua nodded, his mind already racing ahead to their next challenge. Good. We'll need every asset we can muster. The interrogation of captured Cormian scientists yielded a trove of intelligence, each revelation more chilling than the last. Joshua pored over the reports, his face grim as he pieced together the enemy's plan. A shipyard, he muttered, studying the grainy surveillance images. Hidden in the Krill Nebula. Emily leaned in, her brow furrowed. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they're building in there, it's massive. Joshua's eyes hardened. And a direct threat to everything we've built. The UGA war room crackled with tension as Operation Celestial Forge took shape. Admiral Blackwell's voice boomed through the comm channels. All ships, engage stealth systems. We're entering the nebula's outer boundary. Joshua gripped the command rail of the Earth flagship Goliath, watching as the swirling gases of the Krill Nebula enveloped them. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge. Cormian pickets, Blackwell roared. All ships, battle stations. The nebula erupted in a firestorm of plasma bolts and energy beams. Joshua watched in awe as Commander Tirana's fighters wove through the chaos, their precision strikes clearing a path for the larger vessels. As they penetrated deeper into the nebula's roiling interior, Joshua's breath caught in his throat. There, suspended in the cosmic maelstrom, loomed a structure of impossible scale, the Cormian shipyard. By the stars, Blackwell whispered, his usual bravado momentarily silenced. Colonel Hoffman's voice crackled over the comm. Ground assault team is ready, sir. Just give the word. Joshua nodded grimly. You have a go, Colonel. Emily and I will lead the breach team to the control nexus. The battle raged across multiple fronts. Hoffman's forces engaged Cormian troops on the outer platforms, while Blackwell's fleet traded devastating broadsides with the enemy's completed warships. Joshua led his team through the shipyard's twisting corridors, the air thick with smoke and the scent of ozone. They fought their way through waves of Cormian defenders, each meter gained paid for in blood and sweat. Finally, they reached the central computer core. Joshua's fingers flew across the alien console, uploading the virus that would cripple the facility's defenses. It's done, he called out. Now let's... A deep, resonant voice cut through the chamber. I think not, human. Joshua spun, his weapon raised, to face a towering Cormian figure. The alien's eyes blazed with fanatical intensity, his bearing unmistakably that of a seasoned warrior. Admiral Vokrath, Joshua breathed, recognizing the legendary commander from historical records. Vokrath sneered. So the inferior races remember me. Good. It will make your subjugation all the sweeter. The Cormian admiral's monologue was cut short by the wail of alarms. The virus had taken hold, and the shipyard was tearing itself apart. This changes nothing, Vok Wrath roared as he fled. The Cormian Empire will rise again. Joshua and his team raced back to their shuttle, the station disintegrating around them. As they cleared the blast radius, Joshua watched Tirana's fighters systematically dismantling the awakening Cormian fleet. The shipyard's destruction lit up the nebula like a newborn star. Joshua allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction, but he knew the war was far from finished. As long as fanatics like Vok Wrath existed, the galaxy would never truly know peace. Joshua Bennett stood at the viewport of the UGA flagship Goliath, gazing at the bustling spaceport of New Prospect. The colony had transformed over the years, becoming a shining beacon of interspecies cooperation. Towering skyscrapers of human and Vulcan design stretched towards the stars, while ships from a dozen worlds glided between them. Quite a sight, isn't it? Admiral Blackwell's gruff voice broke through Joshua's reverie. Joshua nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. Sometimes I can hardly believe how far we've come. Their moment of reflection was cut short by a priority transmission. Colonel Hoffman's face appeared on the nearby holo display, his expression grim. Sir, we have a situation. Multiple remote colonies are reporting critical infrastructure failures. Crops withering, power grids collapsing. It's spreading fast. Joshua's brow furrowed. Any signs of Cormian involvement? Hoffman shook his head. No direct evidence, but the pattern is unsettling. Within hours, Joshua had assembled a crisis team. Dr. Chen pored over data streams from affected colonies, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. It's nanites, she announced, her voice tense. Incredibly sophisticated. They're consuming resources and replicating at an exponential rate. High Counselor Neron stepped forward, his usually stoic features etched with concern. This may not be Cormian in origin. There are legends among my people of an ancient machine world called Centaurus 7. Joshua leaned in, intrigued. Go on. Its abandoned factories were said to seed galaxies with self-replicating nanites. If left unchecked, they could reduce entire civilizations to ruin. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Joshua's mind raced, formulating a plan. Hoffman, Tirana, he barked. I want strike teams at key outbreak sites. Analyze those nanite transmissions, find their source. As Hoffman and Tirana's teams deployed, Chen worked tirelessly to develop a countermeasure. Days later, she emerged from her lab, exhausted but triumphant. I've cracked it, she announced. A shutdown code. It's temporarily halted nanite growth on New Prospect. Joshua nodded grimly. Good work, but we need a permanent solution. The confirmation came through encrypted channels. Centaurus 7. Long dormant, the machine world had awakened. Joshua addressed the gathered alliance leaders, his voice steady. We face an unprecedented threat, but within Centaurus 7 lies our salvation. Ancient Vulcan protocols, capable of shutting down the nanite forges permanently. He turned to Neron. I'll need your expertise on this one, old friend. Neron inclined his head. Of course, and may I suggest we bring along Vara Sorel? Her knowledge of First Civilization machine worlds could prove invaluable. As the massive Allied fleet prepared for departure, Joshua couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. They were venturing into the unknown, with the fate of countless worlds hanging in the balance. The journey to Centaurus 7 was tense, punctuated by skirmishes with rogue nanite swarms. Blackwell's ships formed a protective cordon around the ground teams as they made planetfall. Vara Sorel, her eyes wide with wonder and trepidation, led them through the labyrinthine structures of the machine world. The energy signatures are faint, but present, she reported. The protocols are here, just sleeping. They fought their way through automated defenses, Chen's expertise proving crucial in navigating the alien systems. Finally, they reached a chamber unlike any other, an ancient Vulcan temple, incongruously organic amidst the mechanical landscape. The master control key, Vara breathed, approaching a shimmering obelisk. As she initiated the upload sequence, a cold voice cut through the air. "I'm afraid I can't allow that." Lieutenant Cordath stepped from the shadows, a cruel smile twisting his features. In his hand, he clutched a pulsing device, the true control key. "For too long, we've languished in the shadow of our biological weaknesses," Cordath sneered. "It's time for a new order, a perfect, mechanical future." Before anyone could react, Cordath activated the key. The temple shuddered as ancient systems roared to life. Joshua's mind raced. They'd come too far to fail now. He locked eyes with Chen, a silent understanding passing between them. As Cordath gloated, Chen's fingers flew across her datapad. With a triumphant cry, she initiated a countermeasure. The nanites surrounding them froze, then began to dissolve. Cordath's eyes widened in disbelief. "What have you done?" he snarled. Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Reversed their temporal signature. They're regressing to their inert state." Cordath's face contorted with rage. He lunged for a nearby console, his intentions clear. "He's going to overload the reactors," Neron shouted. Joshua didn't hesitate. "Evacuate, now!" As they raced through the collapsing structure, Joshua's mind whirled with the magnitude of what they had accomplished and the challenges that still lay ahead. As the evacuation shuttle cleared Centaurus 7's atmosphere, Joshua watched the machine world implode, taking with it the nanite threat and Lieutenant Cordath's misguided ambitions. Weeks later, Joshua stood before the United Galactic Alliance Council, delivering his report on the Centaurus 7 incident. As he concluded, a priority message flashed across the chamber's main display. "Counselors, we have an urgent situation," announced Admiral Blackwell, his weathered face grim. "The Zillion civilization is under attack." High Counselor Neron stepped forward, his normally stoic features etched with concern. "The Zillions? But they've been isolationists for millennia." Joshua's mind raced. "If they're reaching out now, it must be dire. We need to act fast." Within hours, Joshua had assembled an elite team. Emily Chen, Colonel Hoffman, Commander Tirana, and High Counselor Neron himself. As their ship entered hyperspace, Joshua briefed the group on the little they knew about the enigmatic Zillions. The scene that greeted them upon exiting hyperspace was one of devastation. The Zillion homeworld, once a jewel of technological achievement, now lay in ruins. Towering spires of crystal and light stood shattered, while swarms of metallic invaders scoured the landscape. "By the stars," breathed Emily, her eyes wide as she studied sensor readings. "Those machines, they're unlike anything we've encountered before." Joshua nodded grimly. "Let's hope the Zillions have some answers for us." They made planetfall in a relatively secure zone, greeted by a delegation of Zillion scientists. The aliens were tall, slender beings with iridescent skin and large compound eyes that seemed to shimmer with intelligence. "We welcome you, allies," spoke their leader, his voice a melodious hum. "I am Nova Prime, chief scientist of the Zelion Concordat." As Nova Prime led them to a fortified command center, he explained the situation. The machine army had appeared suddenly, emerging from long-dormant wormholes scattered across the planet. Despite the Zillions' advanced technology, their lack of military experience left them ill-equipped to repel the invasion. "Our analysis suggests these units originate from a world known as Arcanica Prime," Nova Prime revealed, activating a holographic star chart. Neron's eyes narrowed. "The graveyard planet? No expedition has ever returned from there." Joshua exchanged glances with his team. "Then it looks like we'll be the first." Over the next several days, Joshua and his allies worked tirelessly to shore up Zillion defenses. Colonel Hoffman drilled Xylian volunteers in combat tactics, while Commander Tirana's fighters provided crucial air support against the relentless machine swarms. As the situation on the ground stabilized, Joshua prepared for the journey to Arcanica Prime. Nova Prime insisted on accompanying them, his expertise in xenoarchaeology potentially vital to unraveling the mystery of the machine invaders. The approach to Arcanica Prime was tense. the ship's sensors struggling against the planet's corrosive atmosphere. As they descended through swirling clouds of metallic dust, the shattered hull of an enormous alien vessel came into view. "Incredible," muttered Nova Prime, his compound eyes flashing with excitement. "A dreadnought of the first ones." They set down near the crash site, donning protective suits before venturing out onto the toxic surface. The team fought their way through waves of Guardian machines, each more deadly than the last, as they made their way to the dreadnought's control core. Inside, they found themselves face-to-face with an impenetrable energy barrier. Nova Prime's attempts to bypass it proved futile. "We need the original deactivation codes," he concluded, frustration evident in his harmonious voice. Emily, who had been poring over data extracted from disabled machine units, spoke up. "I think I've found something. References to a world called Pyrios, home of the Pyrian civilization." Joshua nodded, a plan already forming. "Then that's our next stop. Let's hope these Pyrians are in a helpful mood." As they prepared to leave Arconica Prime, Joshua couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The machine army was just the beginning. Whatever awaited them on Pyrios would determine not just the fate of the Zillions, but potentially that of the entire galaxy. The journey back to Xyle Prime was a somber one. Joshua sat in his quarters aboard the flagship, staring at the empty chair where High Counselor Niran had once dispensed his sage advice. The victory against the Pyrian Forge smelter felt hollow in the wake of such loss. As they entered Zillion space, cheers erupted from the planet below. Swarms of crystalline ships darted around the battered human Vulcan fleet, their pilots trilling joyous songs of liberation. Joshua forced a smile, but his heart wasn't in it. Nova Prime greeted them at the spaceport, her iridescent skin shimmering with excitement. "Champions of Zyl! Your deeds will echo through the ages?" Joshua nodded mechanically, his eyes scanning the crowds. He caught sight of Emily Chen, her own face a mask of exhaustion tinged with concern. She made her way to his side, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "There's a ceremony," she said softly, "for Niran, the Zillions. They have a way." Joshua's brow furrowed, but he allowed Emily to lead him away from the jubilant throngs. They descended into the bowels of the Zillion capital, the crystalline corridors giving way to rough-hewn stone. Strange, alien chants reverberated through the air. In a secluded grotto, they found Nova Prime waiting. Robed attendants parted, revealing an ornate device pulsing with ethereal energy. "A synthesis pod," Nova Prime explained, her compound eyes flickering. "It can capture the essence of a being at the moment of death. Niran, he understood its purpose instinctively." Joshua's breath caught in his throat as Nova Prime activated the ancient mechanism. A familiar warmth filled the chamber, and within the pod's containment sphere, a glowing form began to take shape. "Joshua." Niran's voice, tinged with static but unmistakable, filled the grotto. "My friend, my student." "Niran," Joshua whispered, stepping forward. We failed you." The spectral form shimmered. "No, Joshua. You succeeded beyond my wildest hopes. The Alliance lives. The Zillions join our cause. My physical form may be gone, but my spirit, it shall guide you all." As Niran spoke, his essence coalesced into a brilliant mote of energy. Joshua placed his hand against the sphere, feeling the familiar presence of his mentor. "I will carry your memory," Joshua said, his voice thick with emotion. "To every world we unite." The ceremony concluded, and Joshua emerged from the grotto transformed. The weight of loss still pressed upon him, but it was tempered now by renewed purpose. Emily fell into step beside him, her eyes shining with perseverance. "What now?" she asked. Joshua looked to the stars, visible through the crystalline spires of the Xylian capital. "Now," he said, "we build on what Niran started. The real work of our alliance begins today."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.